little bit about an experience that I had yesterday to volunteer at what's called Defy Ventures. Basically, they have this program to bring into correctional facilities and provide like professional and business development to inmates. And through that process, these individuals are able to sort of transform their lives through facing a lot of, what they've been persecuted for, like head on, and to have a chance to actually feel as though they can take control over their life again and build something and become better despite their circumstances. And I got to go in there and provide, business advice, feedback on like resumes, personal statements, and some of the business concepts that, these men have developed. And it was just such a cool experience to be able to like look at some of these men in the eyes and truly see transformation, truly see change, and just how much joy and peace that it's brought to their lives, and to hear like their stories, and also see that they're still like working through some things, but they haven't given up. I think it's just such a good reminder, and such like a good grounding for us in our lives, and just and what like Jesus even talks about as far as like forgiveness, and the fact that like that's what he went and died on the cross for, was this idea that like we could be forgiven through his sacrifice, and in return receive this sort of grace and freedom. And like Defy Ventures isn't necessarily like a Christian organization, but like you could see what forgiveness and letting go of like the shame can do to transform a person. And it was just so beautiful to see in these men, because they had to, they had to face like a lot of internal turmoil to go through this process, and their resilience to do so. It just like made me feel very proud of them, because like vulnerability is something that's just very, very difficult. It's something that isn't, a pretty thing that, society has even like pushed for men specifically, to have like the space to do. And we started in through this like process and volunteering, like we actually learned some of the similarities that we had with one another, and we had this opportunity to actually create empathy and really build this like relationship and bond with these men, so that we don't come from a place of like pity. Like these are men who have like taken responsibility for what they've done, and are now like working hard to better themselves and do better, and also like speak into their families' lives if they have family, their kids' lives if they have kids. Some of them were even like shared about how like they've been able to inspire their kids while being in prison, to have better lives. And I think it's just so amazing that through the power of forgiveness, that like they still get a chance to be fathers, despite like the past, that like God has kind of given them this opportunity to still like speak life into their kids. And I'm just so excited for what this organization is doing. And I think that as they continue to grow into other facilities, they're really going to bring a lot of transformation into men's lives. And it does have reach outside of the prison as well, as I just mentioned, of men being able to still speak into their families' lives and gain this sort of like forgiveness through accountability and facing some of the fears and past that they have. And it was just like such a great reminder too that like there's no sin that Christ is unable to forgive, and there's no like sin that is truly like untransformable or like isn't able to like have retribution for. And it's just so grounding when we think about this like smaller sins that we experience every day, and the type of like unforgiveness that we have for ourselves sometimes that when you compare it, and I know it's like it's not a good thing to compare sins and like at the end of the day like sin is sin, but I think just from a worldly perspective and from the perspective that we have of like being so hard on ourselves, to just remember that there are men that are fighting to redeem like some of like the worst sins that you can do, or worst things that you can do in this world, and they're truly being transformed. And that just goes to show that it's possible for you, that it's possible like through the process of forgiveness, and also just recognizing that Christ has already forgiven you. And I think that in itself is what creates space for us to forgive ourselves. And it's a very difficult thing to process because we live in a world where shame is like at the forefront. Cancel culture is like at the forefront. You make one wrong move and it's like lights out. There's no sort of grace. There's no sort of like understanding that, we're all human beings and that we make mistakes. It's the case even for like dating and red flags, that we've like lost this ability to create space for mistakes, to create space for imperfections. And the reality is like none of us are perfect. And when we don't create space for those imperfections, we're actually not creating space for our own imperfections. So we end up just being hurt human beings walking around the earth in misery, and sort of just like bringing other human beings into that. And I believe a lot of the transformation that's required in this world just comes from this idea of forgiveness. And not only forgiving ourselves, but forgiving other people. And it doesn't mean there aren't any consequences. Like from an extreme standpoint, we see that like men who have committed a crime had consequences, and I think that's the case for anyone that sort of screws up. And in the case of like those consequences, it's usually determined by the people that have influence or part of what happened. And I think as a society, we've started to insert ourselves into scenarios that don't really concern us, because we want, out of our own selfishness, to have an opinion, or to like have some sort of like authority or control over a situation that really doesn't concern us at all. And that's honestly not really even fair, because one, we're never going to know the depth of context of what actually happened. And we also have no stake in it. So like our opinion holds no risk for our own selves. When in reality, like there's a huge risk for the people who are involved. So like you have no stake in the game, and that's just a position that is just kind of disrespectful for the people that do. And yeah, I just think that as we start to implement forgiveness in our lives and the things that we do have a stake in the game with, our own sort of problems that we have in our own lives, our specific relationships that we are a part of and are able to influence, it'll start to sort of transform people's hearts, and recognize that at the end of the day, like, we're all human. We're all making mistakes, that like, yeah, we may like measure certain sin differently, but ultimately God measures all sin equally. And thankfully, like, we have Jesus who has forgiven all of our sins, as long as we are to accept that he died for them, that he provided that gift for us, that it wasn't anything that we even earned, but it was something that out of the love that God has for us, decided to send his only son, that was also him, down here to pay the price for all our past sins, all our current sins, and all our future sins. So I think when we posture ourselves in knowing that, we're able to better create space for forgiving ourselves as well as forgiving other people, so that we can be more Holy Spirit led in the way that we live our lives every day. And it just creates a lot of like peace too, because people take on responsibility that they don't really need to take on, that it really isn't on them to take on that responsibility, and it becomes this weight that actually sort of hinders and like becomes too much for them to carry. And you just have a lot of people that in today's society especially that it's just like carrying the weight of the world. It's like you don't have the ability to do that. Like, you don't have the influence and the power to, enact change at a global level as one individual. Like, that can only happen with, many people, thousands, millions of people involved, especially at a global level. That's why you have nations. That's why you have leaders for each nation. It's why you have governments for each nation. It's why it's broken into states and cities and all of these things, because it requires more than one person to actually like handle the weight and like the responsibility to lead so many people and to make decisions that impact so many people. And you just have like a lot of people, I feel like, that have this false misconception that it's just like one decision that's going to solve everything, or one decision is like going to like fully like solve everything. It's just not the case. This world is so complex, and the variables and the things that each individual sort of puts into the pot is like chaos. And you make one decision, it impacts other people, which impacts other people, which impacts other people. And these are the sort of things that, even as a founder, like, I have to consider. And, I'm not leading a large company right now, and there's a reason. Because, like, I feel as though, and I'm led to believe that God believes that I need to be trusted with little right now, until I'm able to be placed in a position where I can be trusted with that sort of complexity, from a foundational standpoint of being able to make decisions that are difficult, being able to make decisions that have impact on people's lives, because as a founder of a company, I'm going to be paying people their salary, their livelihood, that's going to impact their lives. And that's a big responsibility. It's not as easy as just like making a decision to solve a problem without recognizing that there's actual consequences to the decisions that I make. So that just comes from just like growth and character building, and just having more awareness, and even for being able to forgive like the leaders who have chosen to make a choice that wasn't necessarily the best choice to make, because like ultimately what they're already doing right now is a very difficult task, and they're going to make mistakes, and everyone's not going to be able to be pleased from the decisions that they make. That's just the case. There's no like perfect decision that results in, everyone winning. Like, there's going to be people that benefit from a decision, and there are going to be people that don't benefit from a decision. And you do your best as a leader to stay neutral, to like sort of spread like the benefits and make the decision that at least is a compromise. But you're not always able to accomplish that. And like even with that intention of doing so, it doesn't always result in the way that you think it's going to happen. And that's why, like, as leaders and as like someone who puts Christ first, like I have to have faith that my faith is placed in God, so that when I'm making these decisions, I have to trust that what God has planned is good, and not beat myself up as a leader in these circumstances that I maybe missed the mark, to be able to continue moving forward to do better, to continue to trying to make more and more like better decisions as we grow as a company and as we sort of trek through life together, because life is messy. We're all prone to making mistakes, and that's why, like I said, forgiveness is just so important as a part of the process. And you see and kind of bringing this back full circle, is just being able to see what forgiveness can do as a part of like growing and creating space for forgiveness in the process. Man, you can do amazing things in this world. And I really believe like as a nation, and just like companies or as a collective or communities or whatever, if we're able to implement like forgiveness within our communities and sort of just let go of the things that we've been carrying for so long, and just putting our differences aside to unite, there's no stopping what can come from that. And it's only good that can come from that. And I'm faithful that God will show up in those moments and really start to transform not only people's lives, but also the lives of, also like this nation as a whole. So I'm going to end the podcast episode with that. And I hope to, hear from you guys soon. And we're going to get started on developing the tool that I mentioned in the previous episode very soon, and provide opportunity to sort of connect people through video, to start having more conversations and start connecting more on a deeper level. So I'll see you guys next time.